Hey, good day, all. Welcome to the Common Good Podcast. It's a Tuesday, September 7th, day after Labor Day. And this is the politics edition of the Common Good Podcast. Doug Pagitt here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, joined as always on Tuesdays by a man just outside of Fayetteville, Arkansas, Robb Ryerse. Hi, Rob.
Hey, Doug. How was your Labor Day?
You know, I did not rest from my labors. I leaned into my labors. I'm not a laborer by trade. So I always feel like Labor Day is a day when I should get some work done.
Nice.
Growing up, by the way, I didn't know Labor Day in its sort of a day to honor those who labor and build this country by their labor narrative at all. I knew it as the day before school started, the last day of the state fair, and one of the random Monday holidays that you get. And maybe it's because I wasn't in a union family. I don't know. I don't know why I didn't know about Labor Day and its rich story and history.
Yeah.
You either? You didn't know it?
No, I really didn't. We spent our Labor Day walking around a museum, which was really kind of nice. Yeah, glorious.
Like
Listen, I wanted to tell you, my dear wife Vanessa, that I absolutely adore, and she's been a part of the Vote Common Good effort as well.
Yeah. Speaker and writer in the Vote Common Good stable.
Yes. She had a dream the other night, and she woke up a little freaked out. Apparently, she was dreaming that all sorts of awful things were happening in the world. Terrible things going on. Things that required leadership and strong, wise, compassionate judgment and good leaders. And she was in a room with you and me, the three of us.
That's a terrifying situation to find yourself in.
We were charged with fixing all the problems in the world, the three of us.
Solving the problem.
You, me, and Vanessa, yeah. And she said she just kept saying, isn't there like a committee? Isn't there like some educated men who are gonna like figure this out? And the answer just kept coming back, no, it's the three of you. And so Vanessa dreamt that the three of us were going to solve the problems of the world, which is probably what this podcast is all about, right?
Well, let's get after that right now. And so, because I'll tell you, nothing is as scary as the thoughts in your head. That will do it to you. Well, let's get after that. Let's solve some of the problems of the world. One of the problems that I would love to solve right now in Canada is the fact that I don't have my typical camera. I take a lot of care and interest in the camera and the sound of this live streaming podcast. And I sent my camera off to San Diego, California, where it will become a welcomed partner along the We the People ride from San Diego to St. Augustine, Florida, along the United States and Mexico border and the United States coastline, a 3,223-mile trek that starts on Friday. So I will join up with that camera in a few days. It's in a trailer being pulled by a truck. So anyway, I'm using a webcam, which is fine. Most people use webcams for this kind of thing. I'm just having a hard time living with it. So I can't solve that problem today, but sometimes the only way you can deal with a problem is to name it.
Yeah. And one of the problems we're going to talk about in a few minutes, we're going to be joined by a guest, and we're going to be talking about the California recall, which it's just, I don't know. I don't understand what's happening in California. I don't understand why they seem to do this every once in a while. So we're going to try to delve into this and wrap our brains around what is happening in California in terms of their gubernatorial leadership and the recall election of Gavin Newsom. So that's coming up in a few minutes.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I have a bone to pick with them. I'm not totally sure where that phrase comes from, a bone to pick, but
the entire state of California.
Well, with their political approach, the over democratization of their votes on things. The lack of representative form of democracy and the straight to voters
Yeah.
referendums, or is it referendi? Referendums and recall votes. All of that is anyway. It seems to not be a way to run a country or a state or a
Yeah. If
municipality. So
m-
I have a bone to pick with
yeah.
the good people, and maybe they'll straighten me out and help me understand why it is that the citizens should then be undoing their own vote. I mean,
Yep.
we'll get into this later. We have a system for such things. It's called an election,
Yep.
and you know. But okay, we'll get into all that later. Hey, Rob, this is one of the other things that Tuesday after Labor Day is often called is the start of the political season.
Yeah.
There are many candidates for whom they won't start any of their political life and work until this sort of monumental moment of Labor Day has passed. And then things kick in. And people say this all the time. No one pays attention to the news. People are not back in their regular lives. They're not doing their normal things. So we find ourselves in that season. And I thought before we talk about California, we should talk about some of the broader sense of what we do in the political spaces here at Vote Common Good. The Common Good podcast is one of the many offerings brought to you by the people at Vote Common Good. And we talk to candidates and people who are running for office and people who are influencing votes around the nation. And I thought it'd be good to update people on what we've been doing. We've been talking with people running for Senate, people running for governor, people running for the House of Representatives. We are in these conversations, and I think just to set a little space and place for people to understand where we are in the season, like where the what people are doing in their politics as we meet with candidates, do our training. We run this best in class training for how to connect with faith voters as progressive and common good candidates. So we get to hear a lot from them and what they're thinking about and what they're doing. So let's paint a little picture for the good people of what it is that goes into someone running for office. Because often we don't, if you don't know what's going on in politics, these people just sort of show up on a fancy printed piece of cardboard in your mailbox with their picture on it, making promises to you, and understanding how someone got there very very opaque to many people. So let's give them a little picture of what the background is on how someone becomes this and what we do with these folks.
Yeah. So I think folks generally know that there's a primary election in which the voters in a political party choose who their representative is going to be in the general election. So right now, most of the candidates are kind of gearing up for their primary election. Some have primaries that are very competitive and very crowded, and some don't have primaries at all. They don't have enough. I mean, they have a primary in that the primary votes are going to be tallied and whatnot, but they don't have an opponent in the primary, so it's just a fait accompli. And so right now, much of the work that's being done is kind of recognizing that primary season begins in the late winter, early spring, and depends on the state. But it gets kind of hot and heavy in the spring and into the summer. They're gearing up for putting a campaign team together, raising money, because all of those mailers that they send to people's mailboxes, the radio commercials, the TV commercials, the staff, all of that costs money. And then, putting plans together. Their candidates have to, in their campaign teams, they have to calculate, what's our win number? Well, like, what's it going to take to win this election? And there's a formula that goes into that. It's a little bit of a guessing game because midterm elections tend to be different than when there's a presidential election happening. More people turn out, so you've got to factor in all of that kind of thing, and then figuring out, okay, this is X is the number we need to win. How do we get there? And so putting a field plan together. Now, this year, as happens every 10 years, all of this is super complicated by the fact that the congressional lines are going to be redrawn. So
And
this doesn't affect
that's because of the census that
the
comes every 10
census.
years, and
Yep,
that has to do with
exactly.
populations, and then the populations dictate how many representatives there are and where people live, and so
Yep,
every 10
yep,
years there's a bit of scrambling
yes.
that goes
And
on, and we're
there's
in one of those periods.
Yeah, and there's kind of two things involved with that. One is reapportionment. So we have 435 seats in the House of Representatives. Um, how those get divvied up by state depends on population. So states over the last 10 years that have lost population are going to be losing congressional seats. States that have gained population are going to be gaining congressional seats. So, for instance, Texas is picking up 2 congressional seats.
Well,
Um,
great. Yeah, they deserve
yeah,
more influence, than ever.
Florida's picking up 1, North Carolina's
Yeah,
picking
them
up
too.
1, and then states like New York and California, Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania are all losing congressional seats. So,
Which,
that all
Rob,
of
I
that's
just wanna
happening.
note that those states tend to be referred to as, red or blue states based on who they voted for statewide.
Yeah, in the
Governors
presidential.
as well
Mhm,
as and presidential,
mhm.
president, governors, and senators. And the list you just gave means that more population growth is happening in states that vote for Republicans, Florida,
Mhm.
Texas, North Carolina, than those who vote for Democrats, typically statewide, New
Mhm.
York, Pennsylvania, California. There's a thing going on that there's a shift that's happening. Now, it doesn't mean those states are going to stay the way they are, but that demographic recognition that
Yep.
states that are organized in a way where there's more Republican representatives are growing, and Democrats are declining in their number of representatives. That confuses people who tend to think like, no, 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 wait, 84 million people voted for Joe Biden and only 72 million people voted for Donald Trump. Like, there's millions more who support Democrats. Why is this happening? Well, because we have a state-run system. Where those people live make a difference, and so there's lots of work going on trying to move those places. But this census business is a big deal.
Yep.
Hey, what one other side note? And you probably know the numbers on this. Currently, there's 435 members of the House of Representatives. So these are the people that are elected every 2 years and represent people in their congressional districts. Some years ago, that number became the permanent number. Previous to that, the setup of the government was that every X number of people, whatever it was, 170,000 people or some
Mhm.
number,
Yeah.
every time there was that number of people in a population, they added a representative. So it was supposed to be that the number of representatives would grow as the population of the country grew, so that representatives would all represent roughly the same number of people,
Yeah.
right? So you wouldn't have pockets where you'd have a city that has 12 million people in it, and some representative there, has only one vote for all of those people. The House of Representatives is supposed to balance what the Senate was not going to balance, which is just 2 from every state, no matter how many people live in the
Yep.
state. But then they changed that, really just as a management tool, because the population of the United States started growing. I think our number of representatives would be over 1,500 or over 2,000 members
Mhm.
of the congressional house, if that were the case. So that's another thing just to remember, that the
Yep.
design of our representative form of democracy had some assumptions built into it that we've changed over time,
Yep.
especially how
Yep.
many people does a representative represent.
Yep.
That's
And
a very curious
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, and the other thing for candidates that are running for Congress right now, that is super complicating what is already a difficult process, is that the lines are all going to be redrawn. So because of this, the census happened, and there's a little bit of conversation in the chat about how that process happened, and if it's trustworthy, because it wasn't, it was truncated a bit by the pandemic, but so the census happens, and that mandates that the states have to redraw their lines to try to bring about that kind of balance that you were just describing. So they try to do that on the state level, and have kind of congressional districts of equal population size. And what that leads to is drawing maps that delineate what the congressional districts are going to be. Now, what happens in most states is that the state legislature is responsible to do that. So it depends on, which political party controls that state legislature, and that, like, it gives them the opportunity to draw the lines in favorable ways for their own party or unfavorable ways for their opposition.
Yeah.
There's some states that have kind of independent, objective committees, that nonpartisan groups that draw the congressional lines for them, but they don't. But most states do not, and so many of these candidates don't know what district they're even running in. They don't know who their opponents
represent. Yeah.
Who their opponents are, or who they're trying to represent. And so that process is all in flux. I was talking with a candidate the other day who is, running in Illinois, and there's some question about which district she's even going to be in. And who her opponent is going to be. And so all of that makes this, like, it's just a very complicated time.
Right.
It's a time where everybody is, like, the runners are in the blocks ready to go, and you're just waiting for the gun to sound. And so we're in that kind of moment of tension right now where, like, okay, the race is about to begin, but we don't know exactly when or what it's going to look like.
And this is where that gerrymandering notion comes from, right? Where people have said that that gerrymandering is some guy named Jerry, and the congressional district that he drew up looked like a salamander, so it became sort of a slur used about that. That's why we call it that. But it's called districting, right? That's what they're doing. They're deciding how big is the district. The reason this has to happen is trying to get to some level of parity of the number of people being represented. So that's the reason for it. If you've looked at a congressional district and said to yourself, why is it shaped like that? Like, how come we don't just take a grid and lay it over a state and, like, that's the congressional district? Well, what they're trying to get to is a somewhat equal number of people that every congressperson, every member of the House represents. That's what they're trying to get to. And while getting to that, some people are like, well, how about if we talk about not just how many people they represent, but the likelihood of who that person's going to vote for? So we know that in urban environments, people might vote like this, or in past elections, people that lived on the north side of a highway tended to vote like this. And then that starts to also influence. So when people feel themselves getting angry and shaken up about gerrymandering and it has to stop, recognize that the reason for it is trying to get a numerical parity, so that there's some level of fairness. Now, I'm not advocating, even though some people are, and I'm probably susceptible to being convinced of this, maybe we do need to get the House of Representatives twice the size or 3 times the size that it is, so that all of our representatives are representing a smaller number of people and a more equal number of people without this gerrymandering. No serious person is currently advocating for that, and there's nothing that's not going to solve any problem in the near future. But just know that that's what's happening. And also, a side note on this has nothing to do with who your governor is. It has nothing to do with who your senator is. It doesn't even have anything to do with how a state votes for the president. Those statewide elections, or any other statewide election that's happening, or even a county election, are not being impacted by this. What's being impacted by this is who is your member of the House of Representatives and your state legislatures. Those are impacted by this. So sometimes, and I've heard many people yell about how we have to work harder to win over control of the Senate for either side. And then someone says, but we can't win the Senate because of gerrymandering. That's just not the case, right? That gerrymandering is something that doesn't impact that, because now some people would argue, no, it does, because it depresses turnout and sort of some larger social impact. Granted, okay, fair enough. I guess you come up with a way, but it's not because someone's rigging who gets to vote for whom,
Right.
and and uh, and 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 that's like understanding the system, or especially those of us who have some demands on our political system and want it to be different. Uh, it's really hard to do. And that's going to lead us into our conversation about California here in a few minutes. But the recognition that it's hard, it's hard to do politics, especially in such a large and such a diverse country, that how we're going to organize this thing is in and of itself a difficult thing. So if you're frustrated that why you don't even know who you're going to be running against, every decade we're supposed to take this super seriously. Now, a critique. I live in the greatest state in our union currently. And even in our great state, our legislature, who's going to figure out this, districting, they know it's coming. It comes on a calendar every 10 years. Like, you quite literally have 10 years to plan for it. It's coming. They have to call a special session to get themselves together because they couldn't get it worked out, over the last 7 or 8 months. It's just a little bananas that so many of these commissions, whether they're separate commissions or the legislature's doing it, can't get themselves together to figure out how they're going to do the districting and the redistricting and then plug the numbers in later. I'm not saying they're starting from a blank sheet of paper, but it's going to be a rush job that then no one's going to be happy with. And it's not going to feel very public. It's not going to feel like people understand, because some people, here's the other thing. Some people are going to lose their representative. So they used to vote for, I used to vote for the representative that represented the western suburbs of the city of the city of Minneapolis. And now I vote for a congressperson who represents primarily the city of Minneapolis. We were redistricted. Our house fell on the other side of a line that moved about 4 blocks. And so 10 years ago, we got moved into a different congressional. So all of a sudden, I'm now partied up with a whole different group of people. That's going to happen to a number of people listening to this right now. They might not even know it. They might go to vote next November and be like, I don't even know who this person is. I thought I was voting for, I don't think I'm going to be district out, but I thought I was going to vote for Ilhan Omar because she's my representative. But no, I may have to end up voting for Angie Craig or something. And so most people, they don't have any idea this is going on. And even if they knew it was going on, they couldn't care less. They don't even want to listen to us talk about it right now. This is all the work that goes on, behind the scenes.
And Doug, I just mentioned this, that, the other thing that we could totally expect, especially in this day and age, is that in many of these states, the lines that get drawn and adopted are going to be challenged in court. And we've seen that in Pennsylvania, Ohio, North Carolina. North Carolina.
Some states have demands on their, they had to do this already, and these are now in place, and they're like lawsuits to change it.
Yeah. And so, it's going to make, what is already and normally kind of a crazy season, it's going to make it just even more so. And, for folks that are running for office, it's just a head scratcher for them to figure out, okay, what's all this going to look like? How's it going to work?
Yeah. And so these folks are putting all this together. They're working hard to come up with their messaging. I'm working with somebody who's running for something that seems like it's not very sexy in the political world, but it's the county district attorney. Or is thinking about it. He's putting together some plans to see if he does it. So on the inside of that process of how someone does this, how they go about making the decision, it's not just I'm going to run, I'm not going to run. You sort of ease into it like you're still. It's as if you're in the line at Wendy's and you're pulling up to the drive-through place to order, and you're about to order the greatest salad in America, the full-size apple pecan chicken salad, and you have this period of time where you're deciding, am I going to get the side of fries with that? Am I going to order the small chocolate frosty as well? You're in that space. You haven't ordered yet, so these people haven't announced that they're going to run yet. but
Yep.
they're in that line. They're kind of
Yep.
getting ready, but they're not
Yep.
sure when they get there,
Yep.
are they going to pull the trigger or not? And
Yep.
do it. And then after
Yeah.
they make that order, are they going to sit in regret until they get up to the window to pick up their food, thinking I shouldn't
Yeah.
have, and then get into some sort of a blissful,
Yeah.
fat
Yeah.
and sugar induced
Yeah.
moment of serenity
Yep.
before
And
the food
yeah,
guilt
and
strikes
there's
makes
all,
itself
and we're
again.
just trying to maybe just give a little window into like what's going on. So, I mean, you're helping this county judge. I have a friend who is going to be running for a pretty high profile position, is planning on it, and I would love to tell everybody what it is, but I can't. So anyway, Sunday night I got a text from him, and it said, "Hey, you're one of the few people that know that I'm going to be doing this. Which logo do you like?" And
Yes,
that's the moment, that's the thing that is happening kind of behind the scenes
by the
is,
thousands across this country.
is text like that of like, hey, I've got this narrowed down, I'm trying to figure it out. What do you think about the logo that
Yes.
for my campaign?
Yeah, and a lot of people are in that moment. They're deciding. And if you're thinking to yourself, maybe I should run for office,
Yeah.
nurture that thought. There's a lot of thoughts that pop through your head
Yeah.
that you probably shouldn't spend a lot of time sort of, giving some food and water to. But should I run for office? If you're listening to this, spend a little time thinking about that one.
Yeah. And
We
Doug, I
need
mean,
people like you.
I would even say if you're thinking about it and would like some advice, shoot me an email it's rob@votecommongood.com. And Rob is with two B's, ROBB, rob@votecommongood.com. If you're thinking about running for office, I would love to chat with you about it, and I can answer some questions for you, and would love to be a support to you in that.
Well, speaking of people running for office, the governor of California wanted to run for office and did, and then won. And now people think he shouldn't get to do that job anymore. They're trying to recall the governor, and someone we know in California that we like to chat with for all things common good is Paul Swearengen, and Paul is here with us. Hey, Paul. So, Paul, we're going to ask you to take a tough
How's it
duty
going,
here, my
guys?
friend.
Enjoyed listening to the conversation.
Thank you. We're going to ask you to take on a deep burden and to explain to us California, this California state of mind, and why the state does what it does with its politicians and with its referenda, how it decides on what its laws are going to be and who is going to be representing is unique to many other states. So maybe a little background on you, and then if you would tell us what you know and understand about what's happening in California and why it should matter to any non-Californian. So tell us about Paul Swearingen, spiritual leader, voice of reason in the world,
TikTok pastor,
spouse of a political person. What else do we need to know about Paul Swearingen?
Yeah, interesting. Can you guys hear me okay here?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I am. I'm the TikTok pastor, so to speak. These days, I was pastor of a church that I founded for 10 years, but come from a really unique household. My wife ran for mayor of our city of Fresno. She was a 2-term mayor here. She came very close to winning a statewide race. No Republican has won a statewide race in California since Arnold Schwarzenegger won re-election back in 2004, I think it was. She came very close to winning. She's been very active for many years in the civic arena, a Republican. Recently, both of us have determined that we can no longer allow that word to be affiliated with our name. So we've both gone what is called in California no party preference, which is the largest growing segment of voters out here. But yes, California, when it comes to elections and voting and all these things, we're a very, very unique state.
Okay, so say a little bit more about this, about being one of those Republicans that's just can't seem to identify in your behavior, at least, as a Republican, and maybe even in your self articulation as a Republican. That's a pretty common thing in California, and I'm just sort of supposing, well, Fresno is a little different, and we know that not all of California is the same. it's a little easier to do that in California, I would suspect, than it is for some people who are in some other places, like say just outside of Fayetteville, Arkansas, or something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if everybody sees California as a very liberal state, which it is. But there are pockets here in Central California where I live, Orange County in Southern California. There are very, very, very conservative areas that are almost, Oklahoma and Arkansas like in their politics. At least we think so when we look around at having San Francisco and LA around us. But many of the conservative Californians are moving out to states like Arizona, Idaho, Texas, and starting to turn those states pretty purple, because we're finding conservative in California means pretty liberal a lot of other places. But yeah, for my wife and I, as we started, as we were working in the spiritual realm, in the evangelical realm, I've planted and founded an evangelical church in 2008. Even then, in the early 2000s, we were looking at how much politics had started to intertwine itself with our religious system. And we were uncomfortable with it at that point, even to the point of, okay, maybe we need to invade Iraq and Afghanistan, but we seem like we're really excited about it. And we're not sure God likes war as much as we do. And just seeing how much the abortion issue was driving our belief systems. And so we were uncomfortable with it then. And then came 2015 and Donald Trump. And all of a sudden we're like, hey, this isn't a benign issue. This isn't just a quirky, we need to tweak this issue. This is a darkness and an illness in the system. And so since then we were like, okay, we've got to speak out and say, this is not okay. This is actually what we believe Jesus despised in the church of the first century. And it's time for us to speak out. And so we've been doing that ever since.
So Tricia, in our comments earlier, when we said we're going to be talking about this, said, look, this recall in California, this is a Republican ploy. This is a thing that Republicans are doing because it's, to quote her, the only way a Republican could ever win as governor is in this way. And there's some short history to suggest that that's the case. So love your comments on that. Do you think it's just a Republican ploy? But Republicans don't get to make the rules. And why does California allow for the citizens, not the legislature or not the representatives, to make a decision to remove a governor, as, say, the legislature in New York was having to consider doing when Andrew Cuomo became someone who was no longer fit for representing the state as the governor, as a Democrat in that case? Then the legislature was going to have to decide that, but not in California. In California, they just love putting stuff like this on the ballot. And I say that with a bit of twinge of regret in my voice, because they also do this with referendum that sometimes, I don't know, just ask people to do things that it seems that their representatives ought to be doing, like making laws. So can you say something about that? Is it just a Republican thing? Do only Republicans use it? Why does it exist? And what about this over-democratization of complex issues turned over to voters in popular vote outcomes?
Yeah, there are many unique things about our election system out here. One is the jungle primary voting system, where you can vote for any party in the primaries, and then we have a top two runoff. Which is and I think it's the way states ought to do it. I'm for it because it doesn't lock you into just having a Republican and a Democrat option for everything. But somehow we can, so every election we have, 30 some propositions, which are, again, citizen led, get enough signatures, and you can put any nutball law idea on the ballot. And Californians have to go through it and vote on it. And I don't know what it is about us that we love this idea. And so it's in the Constitution of the state,
really,
that anybody who gets enough signatures, a certain percentage of the registered voterate, can recall a governor at any time. Now, this is only the second time it's ever happened in the history of the state. And back in 2003, we had a governor named Gray Davis, and Gray was not a good governor. He was not. And Republicans were able to get him recalled. And that's how Arnold Schwarzenegger became governor of the state. And so that's it. There's just something in us in California that we think the citizens should be able to call a vote anytime they want. And it's a constitutional law in the state.
Yeah. So, Paul, in terms of process, So there's a threshold for the number of signatures that have to be collected for that recall to then happen. And then it's not, if I understand it correctly, it's not just an up or down vote of should Gavin Newsom be recalled as governor. And then, like we saw in New York, then the lieutenant governor becomes governor. It's actually a whole election where if it's essentially Gavin Newsom has to win to keep being governor. And if you would rather have somebody else be governor, there's other names on the ballot. So it's not like a yes or no question of should Gavin Newsom still be governor. It's I actually think this guy should be governor or this person should be governor instead of him. It's like a whole new election, correct?
It is. It's, and a lot of people are saying we're going to have to re-examine this process after it's over, and it would take a constitutional change to change it. So we're voting two things on September 13th. Yes, no, we want Governor Newsom to remain the governor. Do we want him out? That would be yes. Yes for the recall or no to the recall. And then the second question is, if Governor Newsom is voted out, who do you want to be governor? And there are 46 candidates on the ballot. And it's crazy. And it's a simple majority winner. So there's a scenario here where you could have 49.9% of Californians vote that they want Gavin Newsom to be governor of California. And say the last poll showed Larry Elder, the leading candidate, at 26%. So Governor Newsom could get 49.9% of the vote, Larry Elder get 26% of the vote, and Larry Elder would be the governor of California. Yeah, it's a really bad process. So there's not a runoff. There's not anything. That person that gets the most votes of those 46 candidates would be the governor of California away.
Well, and to be even more dark, even more apocalyptic about it, it doesn't even have to be that high, because some people will vote, yes, you should recall the governor, and then not vote for someone. Or of the 46, people could all get 4% each. Someone could become the governor with 5% of the vote, 6%, 10%. It turns out it's not going to be, it might be 27 or 28%. And I get that people like local control and they don't want the apparatus of government being the system that manages the apparatus of government. There's a logic to that, I guess. But this whole thing, and what really got me wound up about the proposition stuff was the marriage proposition, that in the same year, and you can remind me who was being elected, people voted for progressive candidates and then voted to
Barack
not
Obama.
allow for a proposition of gay marriage. It was 2008. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right. Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So it doesn't feel like these propositions sort of match, and then this other thing doesn't match. And as a larger sense of just sort of having fun with California, because you can always punch up, right? California is the big state. It's the fifth largest country in the world if you use GDP and all that stuff. And California's got all the zing. But it kind of erodes people's sense of like how this all works, right? So then when somebody comes along and says elections are rigged, or this thing isn't fair, or there's funny business going on, and it's not about who wins the most votes, does it kind of erode that sensibility, or is it different in California? Are people like, I don't know, it's like my family. We're a complicated family, but boy, I love them and I'm committed to them.
It's a little bit of all of the above, I would say, Doug. Part of this thing is that proposition, the anti-gay marriage Prop 8 of 2008, or even if you go back into the 90s, like part of what the Republicans are suffering from here in California is when Pete Wilson was running for his second term, he was in real trouble of losing. And so the state Republican committee put up a proposition to take away, state benefits from illegal immigrants. And part of the purpose of those propositions, the gay marriage proposition, 100% was a Republican power play to try to get out the vote. It is, you put up these really incendiary propositions about these web issues to get evangelical Christians to come out and vote. They are get out the vote mechanisms more often than not. The Prop 8 passed the ban on gay marriage, and the court struck it down. So more often than not, these propositions get voted in. The court immediately strikes them down. It's a huge waste of money and effort. And it's completely political more often than not. And as to your commenter on the power grab, I'm obviously coming from a particular perspective. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a fan of Gavin Newsom's. He would not be my best choice for governor of California. But there is no question. The Republicans know they have no chance to win governorship in California. I think Republican registration is down to about 22% of the voter registration in California and still sinking. A lot because of what they did with Pete Wilson back in the 90s and ran Hispanic voters away from the party forever. Is they know this is their only chance, particularly with the really extreme, cracky candidates they put up, to ever have a chance to win a statewide election in California. So there's no question it's a political maneuver rather than, I mean, I think recalling a governor that's doing something absolutely immoral, illegal, and the legislature's not taking care of it, I could get behind that. But having a recall because you disagree with the governor, we have elections every 4 years for that. That's already in place.
Yeah, and just, I mean, there is an election next year. Like, it's not that long. It's not that far away. So what is the motivation for wanting to recall Gavin Newsom?
Well, it's what I just said, underlying, but the reasoning they're using, it was a guy named Orrin Heatley. He's an ex-cop. He's never been involved in politics before. He got this whole thing started, and it mostly goes back to the pandemic, the governor's handling of it. Now, I would say, thank God, I'm glad I wasn't leading during COVID. It was not an easy time. And I don't think the governor did everything right, but I think he did the best he could. But in the middle of it, sometimes you ought to get voted out for just being stupid. And Governor Newsom, let me treat him with honor, was involved in a dinner party at a restaurant in the middle of COVID when he had ordered shelter in place, no gatherings other than immediate family. And he went to a big gathering with a whole bunch of people at this French Laundry restaurant in Napa. And it got out at the same time. Speaker Pelosi had her hair done at a salon, excuse me, when Californians couldn't go to salons. So sometimes you just do stupid stuff like that.
Yep.
And so that's been kind of the impetus of this, the shutdown of businesses. And then they throw in things like homelessness is on the rise, housing, there's a housing shortage. And so our housing prices are going through the roof, which for a homeowner like me is kind of like cool. And just cost of living, taxes. So they throw a whole bunch of other stuff in there. But at the end of the day, they don't like having. And let me tell you something about Gavin Newsom as well. He is a brilliant guy. He is a really good looking guy. His family is a beautiful family. When he goes out and does these press conferences at wildfires, the wind will be whipping and his hair's perfect. And you're just like, how can that beautiful hair stay perfect? I mean, he's part of a political family, a long-term political family. And so there's reasons that people just don't like him because of all of those things.
You just describe all these things that make someone likable.
And he was sort of the leader of gay marriage in our state when he was mayor of San Francisco. He's an egotistical guy, as probably he deserves to be. And some of that just doesn't play well with regular people. And so people just tend to not like him at times.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I mean, look, as someone who pushed hard for the then president of the United States on 2 occasions to be removed from office through the mechanism of impeachment, I am a fan of people in executive office being removed. I think it's a mechanism you have to keep. It has to be in place. The mechanism of public frustration or anger being the motivator for that, and then utilizing the machinations of an election to do that, seems to be an ill-advised way to make a change in your executive leadership. It just feels like you're not going to get to a place of people feeling confident. People barely feel confident when a president or a governor wins 55 or 60% of the vote, still thinking, well, it doesn't really represent me, to then turn it into who can show up on, is this election on Monday, did you say? Is it on the 13th?
The 13th, yeah, whatever day that is, yeah.
It's not even a Tuesday. I mean, this can't be a legitimate election. You can't have legitimate elections on Tuesdays. Not
Well,
on
we have a
Tuesdays.
wonderful mail-in ballot system out here in California,
good
so
Lord.
so
I mean,
many people have already voted.
already voted. Like the
So-
idea that you would remove a governor for a dinner party is the kind of thing that you just really want to say to yourself, this is not how this is supposed to go.
And if we had a governor that, like you say, even at 26%, the highest mark we've seen out there, that person becomes governor is a really bad idea. I think if they tweaked the system to say, then it's a runoff of the top two, it would be interesting. And the Democrats did a very interesting strategy here, because in the last recall, they did put up the lieutenant governor as a candidate, and so the Democrats said, vote no on the recall, and then vote for Cruz Bustamante in the electorate, and I think, and they feel like now that some people said, well, we really like Cruz Bustamante, so let's vote yes on the recall, get Gray Davis out and get Cruz Bustamante in, and that put in Arnold Schwarzenegger for governor with, I think, 42% of the vote or something like that. And so this time the Democrat, I think there are 9 Dems on the ballot, but nobody of any note or name, and the Dems said, we're not going to put up anybody of note. We're going to throw all our eggs in the basket of vote no on the recall.
Yeah.
Well, do you remember what percentage of people voted for the removal back in 2003 or 4?
No, I'm sorry, I don't know that. I think it was. I think it might have been around 58% or something. Gray Davis was a universally despised governor, and he, to his, to be honest, part of the reason he was hated, we were having these rolling blackouts, and everybody thought, what an idiot this governor is. And it turned out that was Enron screwing us.
That was Enron. Right. That was people in Texas screwing over California to try to make a bunch of money off selling power. Turns out. Yeah. Sorry, Rob. Go ahead.
So let's talk for a minute about Larry Elder, who is the leading opposition candidate, and who is poised to become, quite possibly the next governor of California. What do you know about Larry Elder? What should our listeners know about him?
So Larry Elder has been a gift to the Democrats. He's a Southern California conservative talk host. He's an extreme right winger. The Democrats were going to run against Donald Trump for this recall. They were going to say, hey, you don't want to let a Republican in because they're going to start doing Trumpian things here in California. When Larry Elder, but they had guys like Kevin Faulconer, who's a former mayor of San Diego, pretty good guy. He was one of the names out there. Then Caitlyn Jenner came up. But then when Larry Elder emerged, and he had to get a court exemption because he didn't want to turn in his tax returns, which is a requirement of a regular election out here. But then they ruled for the recall, he doesn't have to. When Larry Elder got in, he became a pretty popular candidate for the extreme right-wing fringe of the state, which there is that fringe out here. Extreme right-wing talk host, has said really horrific things in the past about welfare moms, about things like that. A lot of his old content is coming up now. His statement is like, he will immediately get rid of all mask mandates. He will, I will immediately get in there and do all of these things. And so the Democrats now, instead of having to sort of theoretically run against Trumpism, are now running against Larry Elder. And that has been a gift to the Democrats, because Larry is a scary idea as governor to many Californians. And I think a lot of people who might have not even been motivated to vote all of a sudden are like, we don't want that guy as our governor. And one thing that makes this a really important election is that we have I think an 86-year-old senator, Dianne Feinstein here. There's talk that she will retire soon. And if we have a Republican governor, and one of the things Larry Elder is stating, like, if I'm governor, I will, we'll get Feinstein to retire and I'll put a Republican in there and Republicans will take over the Senate. And so statements like those from Larry Elder have been a real gift to the no on the recall campaign. And so Larry Elder becoming the face of this thing, I think if Kevin Faulconer, like I said, the former San Diego mayor, was there, it would be a lot tougher for Democrats to make that case. But now we're inundated every day with commercials with Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and now Joe Biden, the president, is coming out to the state, and they're all saying the same thing, like, you don't want this Trump guy being governor of California, and it's becoming a very effective weapon, I think.
Yeah. So, when this happened before, it led to Arnold Schwarzenegger being elected governor, which is just, funny on the face of it. But, but the politics represented by Arnold Schwarzenegger, married to a Kennedy in Maria Shriver, a very moderate Republican, and some that, very palatable for people in independents, unaffiliated folks like yourself now, Paul. Like just a very palatable candidate in so many different ways, in that kind of, disrupting the typical partisan divides. Larry Elder, not that at all. We're not, this is not the situation that we had that led to Arnold Schwarzenegger being elected. This is, instead of someone who disrupts the party, the typical party loyalties, like Schwarzenegger did, and gives people the opportunity to make an exception. Like, oh, I would never vote for a Republican, but I would vote for that one. Larry Elder is not that guy at all.
Yeah. Arnold Schwarzenegger would not be put up as a candidate by the California Republican Party as it exists today. He is absolutely that rhino, moderate Republican, and he served very much as a moderate Republican governor, and nonetheless could still get nothing accomplished because we have huge Democratic majorities in both houses of the legislature. Pretty much a failure as governor. But you're right, Schwarzenegger was already a face in the Republican Party. He had been out there on presidential campaigns, stumping for presidents. He was mega superstar, as you know. And so turns out, he tried hard to do some good things for California, had a really difficult time because, the Democrats were going to stand against him no matter what. But yeah, that's not Larry Elder. Larry Elder is so far to the right of where Arnold Schwarzenegger was. And, Schwarzenegger's not a supporter of Trump. Schwarzenegger actually has been involved in some movements to try to start a third party. There's big moves in California, particularly because we have our jungle primary system, to try to get a third party to raise up out here. And I think we will see that happen here in the next decade, where there becomes a third party that starts to be a factor out here because people are so dissatisfied with the two parties we have.
Yeah.
You raised this number and said that only 22% are registered Republicans. Part of that is because being registered to a party in California is not as important to participating in the political system, right? That's a big reason. So people shouldn't fool themselves to think that that number of registered Republicans is the cap of how much support a Republican is going to get. There's a lot of Republicans who don't identify that in any database officially, but would be willing to vote for Republicans across the board. Is that right?
Yeah, you're correct. Still, the great majority of moderates tend to vote Republican out here. So we've seen the Republican Party shrink in registration. The Democratic Party has plateaued. They're not growing either. So there is a dissatisfaction with the parties as a whole. So you're absolutely right. And most of those moderates, those no party preference, NPP, would be former Republicans, a lot of them out there. So yes, they do tend to, and that's why it's so crazy to me that Republicans keep putting up these extreme candidates like John Cox in our last governor election. He's on the ballot this time as well, and this guy Neil Kashkari the time before. Such extreme candidates that even moderate Republicans can't vote for them, and that's why they just keep getting crushed in elections over and over again. And when my wife ran in 2014 for state controller, people were telling her all the time, like, I think you're amazing. I would love to vote for you, but I simply cannot vote for the Republican Party ever again. And that's a big sentiment out here.
Paul, do you have
I hear you.
Do you have a prediction of what we're going to see happen when the recall vote takes place?
The Public Policy Institute just came out with a survey last week. Their latest poll. Now they had polled, I think, about a month before, and it was and it shocked the world because it came up dead heat, 50-50 for recall, and I think that scared the Newsom people to death. So they just came up with a poll last week that now shows 58% against the recall, 40% in support. So it's starting to look pretty good that the governor's going to survive it.
Yeah. So my guess, and you guys can talk about this next Tuesday. I will be riding a bicycle from Valley of the Moon, California, to Calexico, California, next Monday during the fateful day of the recall election of the governor of California. But you guys can talk about it. I'm going to put the number at 62% no. I don't know, Rob, if you want to get put a little number on the line here, I think 62% of those who turn out to vote, which again is not the same thing as 62% of Californians. Politicians do this stuff a lot. There will probably be, everybody can guess their number, less than 30% of the California population overall that will vote in this, maybe less than 40%, 50% of people who could vote. So of those who vote, that's not even close to half of the people in California. And I think the number of people who vote no is going to be as high as 62%. Is my guess. I don't think this is something we have to worry about in this case. Rob, do you have a number? You want to put it on a?
Well, I'll go a little lower than that. I'll go 59%.
Yeah, I feel like we're on The Price is Right now. Okay, Paul, are you going to stay?
Paul's going to go $1.
58%.
$1.
The early mail-ins have the Dems have been very pleased with the numbers of the early mail-ins. They're not quite to the last presidential election level, but they're above the last midterm election because the fear was that Dems would not turn out for this election. Now we know most of the early mail-ins are going to be Dems because the Republicans are conspiracy theorists and we're going to vote on election day because that's what real Americans do. So there will be, I assume, a heavy turnout of Republicans on election day. But I think from what I've heard, the Dems are pretty pleased with the numbers so far. They're maybe exceeding their expectations.
You going to put a number on it yourself, though? Are you willing to go?
I think that 58% is about right. I think that's where I'll go.
58, 59, 62. All right.
Yeah.
Hey,
Paul, thank you
so much. Is there anything else? Let me just ask one more question, Paul. If you know, is there anything else on the ballot, or is the only thing people are turning out for a yes or no vote on the governor recall, and then who you'd want to replace him if you voted yes or no?
That's it. That's the only thing we're voting for. And you know what's funny is for the "we hate our tax money wasted" party, this is costing millions and millions and millions of dollars of tax dollars. So that whole "we don't like taxes" thing goes away when it feeds a Republican process. And I always find that very humorous, of what I call a very hypocritical party at times.
Yeah.
Well, we will all be shocked if the recall vote is yes, recall the governor. I'm sure it will shock the whole system.
One other irony I'll tell you about this is there are no limits, by the way, on fundraising on a recall election. There are on a regular gubernatorial election. And so this has allowed Gavin Newsom to bank huge amounts of money that he can put toward his reelection. And it may end up costing Republicans in the long run. The other thing that could be interesting about this is there is some talk that when Feinstein does, say Newsom wins reelection, Feinstein retires, Newsom could appoint himself as that senator. Yeah. And wouldn't that make it fun for all of us?
Yeah. Oh, California. Paul, thank you so much for giving us some insight. We really appreciate it. Most of us, just look at what's happening in California and just kind of wonder about, what it's like to live in a wacky world like that. So thank you for giving us some insight into all of that today. We appreciate you coming on.
Despite all of that, California is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful place. I grew up in the Midwest. I moved out here to college and have lived here ever since. It is, without question, I would not live in any other state in America unless Gabriel the angel came down from heaven and said, "I die if I don't move somewhere else." So we're crazy, we're wacky, and I love it. It's what makes us great.
Awesome. That's
in fact,
awesome.
if you're listening to this and living in California, come and join the We the People ride Saturday morning down in San Diego at Borderland State Park. We're going to put our wheels in the ocean and start riding from there. We love any support we can get. So Californiites, especially those in the San Diego area or west of there over that little mountain we have to ride our bikes over, we'd love to see you. So thanks for being with us today, Paul. Thank you, all of you, for being with us.
And Doug, before we go, a big announcement, right?
Oh, here we go.
The politics, the Common Good Politics podcast next week moves to Monday.
Yes, in light of all the riding effects of people being away and around, this conversation will be a Monday conversation, not a Tuesday conversation. So you're going to get to have the day before. It's as if it's the California election day version of politics, where it used to be on Tuesdays and now is on Mondays.
I think, I think the biggest upshot of this is that I really need to make sure I change it on my calendar so I don't miss it.
Yeah, that's right. Get in there. When it says change just this this calendar event or change all future, click that all future. Change all the future ones. Hey, Paul, thanks. And everybody else, great to see you. And thanks for being with us. And we'll talk to you tomorrow.